All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Nerds of Legend. I am Ben, and next to me is Brendan. And today we're going to be talking about the Legions of the Emperor of Warhammer 40k. You may have seen our first episode. If not, you might want to go back because we talked about Legions 1 through 10. Tomorrow we're going to be covering Redacted through 20. Just a couple things before we get started. Just remember our next book next week is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. That's a pretty good book. Yeah, it's fun. I already finished it. We'll be talking about that one on either Monday or Tuesday. We're going to try and figure out what our actual schedule is. I know we've been kind of flip-flopping, but life's been getting in the way. So we're going to try and select what day and time we're going to be doing these. It'll either be Monday or Tuesday. So
we simply can't stop selecting Hugo and Nebula award winners. It's just every time. Oh, hey, I remember this book. I like it. Yep, it won. Yep. It won.
Yep.
Without fail.
After that, as we finish up this episode, we'll figure out what we want to cover next in 40k. So be thinking about that. Comment section, maybe let us know what you want to hear about next. So, with that, Brendan, let's talk about some Astartes.
Yes, specifically the first founding, the protags, if you will, of the story. Did we stop on Redacted? Did we stop on 11?
Oh, yeah, we did stop on 11 because I was like, oh, well, it doesn't make sense to start with that one next because we don't know anything about it anyway. So, other than some bare comments from some Primarchs that never get resolved. So there you go. If you read some of the books in lore, there's comments that are made about both as the second 2 and 11, right?
2 and 11 chapters. 2 and 11 were struck from Imperial record.
Yeah, and so bad that they. It's assumed that they did some kind of really bad heresy, or they did some other kind of thing, but it's never been never been confirmed what they did by GW, and it probably never will be.
Yeah, it's there for some cheap esoteric enigma. You know, it's like, oh, hey, what happened to them, kind of thing. I think it was indicative of the fact that at the beginning of the game they wanted you to make your own chapter, and like, ooh. You know, there's some that are missing or whatever. There's rumors that like the Firehawks became Legion of the Damned. Mm-hmm. There are rumors that they were one of them, or maybe like the Rainbow Warriors. You know, these chapters that were mentioned in passing in the 80s briefly that are no longer around. Mm-hmm. It's mainly there as a grimdark mechanic, I think. I think answering what happened to these chapters is less interesting than leaving it open-ended. So yeah, there's the famous meme of the guardsman with a gun to his head, and it's like, guardsman, how many chapters are there of Space Marines in the first founding? And it's like, well, if you say 20, you're mentioning those that are heretical and you'll be executed. If you say 18, you're incorrect because the answer is 20 and you'll be executed. So what are you going to do?
Yep. Never been named. We know nothing about them. We just know that they did something really bad.
Yeah, rumors. Now, moving from 11 to 12.
Bad enough that the Primarchs are scared to even bring them up.
Yes, the Primarch. Yeah, they'll use it as a boogeyman. Like, would you want to become like the 10th chapter? And they're like,
nope.
11th rather. Yeah. So Sanguinius, for example, is concerned about the Red Thirst, the defect in his gene seed, and he talks to Conrad Kurz about it. And actually, no, I think he talks to...
I think it was Dorn.
He mentioned it to Dorn. I think he talked to Fulgrim.
Might have been Fulgrim.
You know, he's like, I don't want to become like the second, you know, struck from the record kind of thing. So yeah. It's a fear mechanic.
Yeah. It's assumed that one of them was defective in some way, and then another one was like did something heretical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now we're going from fear to the complete absence of it. We are now moving on to one of the most, not boring, but uninspired of the Primarchs, Angron the 12th Legion.
Angron, the most angry of the Primarchs.
He's angry. His name is Angron.
He's big. He's mean. He's red and he's scary.
Yes, he is Angron. If you're wondering what chaos god he falls to, he's big, red, and prone to violence. Yeah, the World Eaters are his chapter, and they were, before they fell, they were white. They had blue and red highlights. Initially, Angron is cast onto a gladiatorial planet. He's made a gladiator. He is forcibly implanted with the butcher's nails. Kind of look like these cabling, like dreadlocks.
Yeah, they're just like drilled into his skull.
Drilled into his skull.
Yeah. But basically, it's. I believe I've read that Angron was actually like, before he like got completely corrupted by the butcher's nails, was actually like the kindest of the Primarchs. And like nicest one, and then the butcher and his nails are these like things that drill into your skull, and like they zap the pain centers in your head if you do anything other than like violent acts. So like if you spend too long idle or not like killing things, it like zaps your brain and then makes you angry again. So
yeah, he was on the planet of Nuceria, is where Chaos cast him, and they had a technologically advanced society, and the ruling caste separated those of abject poverty by walling the slums away from the rich. And they held these giant gladiatorial death matches to distract the populace.
Bread and circuses, ancient Rome sort of style.
Bread and circuses. And they were all cybernetically enhanced. So Angron receives these butcher's nails. And I believe that they had him subject to specific... I think that there were rumors that he fought Eldari. And that's what they trained him on, but again, those are whispers. By the time the Emperor reaches him, he's essentially like retaken.
Yeah, he leads a gladiator rebellion, and they were like on doing a last stand at the top of a mountain. And right before like he was about to die with his fellow like gladiator brothers who he loved, the Emperor's like, yoink, takes him away. And all his brothers die.
Yeah. He accidentally kills his best friend once he has the butcher's nails implanted, and so he has all this rage and all these. That's the other thing. He can't stop being angry. He can't stop being in pain. So it's just unending. And out of all the Primarchs, he's the only one that's essentially just yeeted and taken, because they determine, hey, he's not going to be listening to reason. Yeah. Upon being teleported onto the bridge of his battle barge, he kills his own men several times. Karn, I think, is the first one. You'll hear Karn the Betrayer. He's a recurring character in a lot of the books, and he's like the first one that is sent in to Angron and just kind of doesn't take his shit, and it's like, hey, you gonna kill me or what? And he relents. A pretty one-dimensional character. Yeah, I would say.
He's just angry.
He never really gets over his anger. His legion is one of the first, not the first, to fall. I believe they're pretty receptive to the idea of warrior lodges. I know it started with the Sons of Horus, but there were fraternities for Space Marines called warrior lodges, where the initial whispers of chaos spread before the heresy. And Angron's demeanor, the way he carried his legion, the way he was, it was a rather quick transition for his chapter. And so they become Khorne berserkers, and they're bloodthirsty maniacs.
And now they're red and brass.
Now they're red and brass. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, etc. It's the most interesting character for the world leaders for me is the woman who captains his battle barge.
Oh yeah.
There's her name escapes me, but there's a ton of fiction regarding the heresy era, and similar to like how the Punisher doesn't have a lot of family, so they give him interesting friends and opponents like Barracuda and stuff in the comics. Angron is kind of Angron, so you learn about Karn and you learn about the other characters in his legion.
You learn about all the people around him and how they deal with Angron.
Pretty much. He becomes a glue guy. They're like, how do you deal with him, and kind of thing. But yeah, That's the 12th Legion.
Moving on, we go
13.
we go to Game Workshop's favorite one,
The Big 13, Rabute Gilliman.
the Blueberries. Oh, I'm sorry, the Ultramarines,
The Ultramarines.
the Boy Scouts.
They're most polls don't even set them as the most popular chapter. They're just by far the most viewed in terms of press, and I mean they're on the box set for Leviathan.
I don't think I've seen I mean, I haven't been in this stuff for very long, but I don't think I've yet to see a box set that didn't feature the Ultramarines. Couple with like Blood Angels, I guess, but
Battle for McCrag, they were on the box set. Yeah, so
if it's a box set that's got Marines in it, it's gonna be Ultramarines.
yeah. Everything that exemplifies a Space Marine, Rabute has it. He's known as a statesman. He's known as a competent ruler. He's a humanitarian. He cares very much for those who are not Astartes, as well as his battle brothers. He's essentially he's playing. We're all playing checkers, and he's playing Civ 5.
Yeah,
he's very much integrates.
I believe by the time the Emperor shows up, Rabute had, whereas most Primarchs had taken over their planet, by the time the Emperor shows up, Rabute had taken over the entire system.
Yes, and
like created an empire.
more or less reformed its government, a veritable utopia kind of thing. So yeah, he just had to sit down with his dad, compared to Angron, who they couldn't even approach.
Yeah.
Rabute forms the Triumvirate during the Heresy era. It's himself, Lionel, and Sanguinius. You could argue that they're more or less the protagonists, other than Big E, of the Heresy era.
Yeah, like the big three Primarchs, essentially.
Yes. He was. Yeah, he was the first Primarch to come back in the 41st millennium. So the entirety of the Primaris storylines and the Inari and the Aeneid,
so basically,
and all that stuff.
If for people that aren't aware, basically where we're at right now in the storyline, most of the 41st millennium, there have not been any Primarchs around. They all disappeared or died or got corrupted during the Horus Heresy. And then what we've seen in recent years is they've started slowly bringing back Primarchs. So I guess they brought back Angron first, right?
Yeah. So Angron is
Apocalypse.
back.
Yeah. And then they brought back, and so the first true Primarch to be brought back on the tabletop in 40k is Rabute Gilliman.
Loyalist side. Yeah. Because Angron is back, Magnus is back, Mortarion is back. They're demon princes.
Actually, yeah, I guess it was probably Mortarion, not Angron, that came first, but maybe I don't know.
Mortarion, Magnus, and their fingers are in different pies.
Yeah.
But Rabute's back, and then this previous Adepticon was the debut of Lionel, which we mentioned.
L. Johnson.
Last episode.
My favorite.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, the Dark Angels for a long time have been a stalwart of the company, but the Ultramarines, starting in the 90s, with the box set of Tactical Marines, with the plastic Second Ed Monopose Marines, the Ultramarines really, they were in SSI's 40k Chaos Gate. They were the feature chapter in Final Liberation. So all of the Space Crusade, all of the 1990s computer games featured
basically all the games you're playing. If there's Marines in it, you're playing Ultramarines.
Yeah. I would say you could argue as to whether or not they're the most well equipped. They're certainly not the most numerous, because Rabute writes the Codex Astartes. Post heresy, they want to prevent heresies from occurring again, so there's certain rules that they follow. So they come up with these successor chapters chapters of Marines inherited from the original founding chapters. The limitation they come up with troop limitations. You can't have any more than 1,000 Marines and 10 companies, and the Black Templars flatly ignore this, and other chapters may or may not follow it to the letter. The Blood Angels have their own variations, but they're the chapter that straight up wrote the rule book on how to be Space Marines. Like that's literally what they did.
Yeah.
If you've seen
some of the legions listen, other ones definitely don't.
Yes, yeah. If you've seen a Space Marine before and you're not well initiated into the game, you've seen an Ultramarine. The statue at Gen Con is an Ultramarine.
It's the same statue. It's the same. If every GW event where there's a convention, every time GW shows up, they bring the Space Marine. It's a big guy in Terminator armor.
Yeah. If you're confused as to why there's some Space Warrior who looks like he's a member of the Indianapolis Cults, that is in fact the Ultramarines. The big U is not a horseshoe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the longer we talk about the Ultramarines, the more my skin crawls. So we can move on.
Yeah, we can move on. They've done some cool stuff recently with them that I think's gotten them like less away from the Boy Scout thing. But for those of us who like other chapters in Legions, it gets annoying because we're like, where's the love for the rest of us? There's 20 other there's 19 other Legions. Why don't we only talk about the blue ones?
Yeah, and they started to expand on that a bit. I'd say, like in the early aughts, they came up with the Blood Ravens for Dawn of War, but hey. Back to Space Marine 2 and Space Marine, and the protagonist is Titus, an Ultramarine. So, I mean, Bolt Gun features of an Ultramarine. So, back to form, as it were.
Oh, well. Moving on to number 14, we have the Death Guard, led by Mortarion.
Yes, Mort, the prefix meaning death. super,
on the nose.
On the nose, yeah. But again, we've already gone through Angron and Ferris Manus and whatnot.
Yeah.
The Death Guard are masters of plague warfare and chemical warfare and all sorts of violations of Geneva Conventions left and right.
Yeah. We can talk about Barbarous a little bit. Why Mortarion's the way Mortarion is.
yeah, and this is a case
why they are the way they are, sort of.
Yeah. And this is a case of the chapter not always aligning with the Primarch, at least in the case of turning. Did you want to jump on this one, Ben?
I don't know. I can start. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, the planet of Barbarous is like essentially like a poison, like plague planet. So there's all these. All the guys in charge of this planet live on these high mountains, and then if you live below a certain elevation, you're like in this poison, virulent smog. And basically, Mortarion comes up and is correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, he like comes up in like the slums of his father is like one of these rulers, right? Or his adoptive father.
Adoptive, yeah.
And so, like, all these people have these, like, are hyper resistant to poisons, hyper resistant to disease, and Mortarion doesn't agree with how, like, the leadership basically lives in these ivory towers, and I believe he leads a sort of like revolt against his like adoptive father and everything, right?
That sounds correct.
Yeah, I don't know everything about this. Basically, he doesn't like the sort of like how everybody's diseased and thinks it should be better. And then, it's a poison world.
It ends up becoming a fortress world for his chapter. The feral population are receptive to the gene seed process because of how hardy they are. It's similar to Baal Secundus.
Yeah,
it's similar to the Blood Angels adherents being very hardy because of the environment.
Yeah.
The gene seed amplifies this resistance even more to unheard of levels. So they are the premier toxic warfare adherents.
Yeah, basically because all of Mortarian's sons come from Barbarous, and they have a ton of like resistance to disease and poison. So for basically Mortarian decides, I'm going to use this since we can all just breathe poison. Why shouldn't we just use poison?
He also very famously was against the use of psychers.
Yeah.
So he thought sorcery was an abomination. He spoke out against Magnus at the Council of Nicaea, and so this is another case of
So basically, eventually, Mortarion takes over the Death Guard. They do a lot of chemical and biological warfare. They attract the attention of a certain chaos god, Papa Nurgle.
Yes.
And he captures the Death Guard and is like, you're mine now, and turns them into like virulent pus-filled like things, and basically it's sort of like he basically strikes a sort of Faustian bargain with Mortarion, right? And so he's like, of either I'll keep torturing your sons, or you join me. And so he agrees to join you, and Nurgle frees them by freeing them of the pain of their diseases, but he doesn't like basically make them stop being diseased. So now they're basically this sort of plague company.
Yeah. Initially, a lot of the promise Mortarion had with the Loyalists at the time were the fact that he had a lot of friction with Jagatai. Jagatai, along with Sanguinius and Magnus, wanted to basically reform the Librarian Corps of the Legions. And so the warp and his hatred of it, that was basically the button to start pressing, that drove division between him and his brothers. And so it's kind of hilarious that out of all the Primarchs to have been overtly approached by a chaos entity, it would have been Mortarion. But again, the decisions you make to protect your children, to protect your legion, and the traitor Primarchs weren't even standing with him. Like they sent, you can't
even breathe the same air they do without getting sick. So I don't really blame his other legions for being like, you know what, you stay over there, go play with your chemistry set, leave us alone. Angron
wouldn't work with him about. I mean, he wanted to excise Magnus from even the traitors. So Conrad wouldn't help him. Angron wouldn't help him. So it's similar to Ferrus Manus being unflinching and unwilling to change his tactics. Mortarion was unwilling to open his mind about the use of psychers, and so he's basically isolated, and his children are forever mutated because of it.
Because he wouldn't accept any help from psychers, which might have protected his legion from the effects of Nurgle.
There you go.
It's 40k hubris.
Lots of hubris.
Moving on to number 14, the 1,000 Sons of Magnus the Red.
Yes, so Magnus very famously is red, is literally red. He is by far the most gifted psyker of the Primarchs. In fact, he's so gifted that, like Icarus, he flies too close, and his own aspirations cost him his father's love. Cost him almost his entire legion. He has a lot of bones to pick with the Space Wolves, especially. So yeah, Magnus has one eye. He's red. Eventually he has one eye, and he has astounding psychic powers. His planet Prospero is, think of like this red tinted Egypt. That it's a utopia. It's reformed underneath him. His initially he's very close to his father.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is during the initial advent of the heresy, Magnus is not considering joining his brothers in rebelling against the Emperor.
Yeah.
In fact, he wants to warn his father so badly that he
uses the powers that the Emperor told him not to use.
Yes, he overrides the psychic protections of Terra to warn his father about the impending danger. And what he doesn't realize is once he voids that protection, he exposes Terra to infection, to assault from the webways. And he also destroys his father's attempt at harnessing the webways for humanity, which was a secret project. All this stuff was ruined because he teleports directly into Terra to warn his father. And Big E, you may not be that initiated into the story, but one of the most recurring themes about the Emperor is that
he's a bad dad.
He's a bad dad. He's a big picture guy. He's so busy with all of humanity. There's not much time for a single individual, and is enraged at Magnus for this. Eventually, it is determined that the Thousand Sons are too dangerous to leave alone. And rather than hear out Magnus, instead, the Space Wolves are sent to sack Prospero. And the Thousand Sons are essentially taken out of the Horus Heresy conflict, even though they begrudgingly throw in with the rebellion. They are nearly eradicated as a force.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is Magnus tries to attempt sorcery to protect his remaining brothers, his remaining Astartes, and they become rubric Marines.
I thought it was his chapter master.
Alraman?
Yeah, I thought it was Armand tries to basically resurrect his the Legion, right as because Magnus is like, no, don't, and then it turns them into basically powder, and that's bound to their armor. So
because of Magnus's actions, Armand, the chief librarian, tries to retain what brothers he can, and in like a second level of magical hubris, they become what's called rubric Marines, and their bodies are atomized and are trapped on the inside of these hollow suits of armor. So they are forever locked within their armor. And Magnus becomes a demon prince of Tzeentch. In the name of knowledge, in the name of perhaps saving his children, and the fact that it's one of the more lamentable stories of a fallen Primarch. It's one of the more he wasn't just an evil dude. It really was hubris and the road to hell being paved with good intentions.
One of the favorite things of the fandom to say is that Magnus did nothing wrong.
Yes, you'll hear that a lot, as opposed to the 16th chapter. Horus.
Yes.
Very different.
Magnus was trying to do things right and failed. Whereas the Sons of Horus tried to do everything, the Luna Wolves, or the Sons of Horus, whatever you want to call them, tried to do everything wrong and kind of failed.
Yeah. So Horus's chapter are initially called the Luna Wolves because during the initial crusade to take the Sol system, Earth, Mars, and so on, his legion were tasked with taking the moon. So that's why they are called the Luna Wolves. The ferocity with which they fought for it. He's gifted the Legion, and the Legion are renamed the Sons of Horus in his honor. Horus is arguably an analog to Rabute, or perhaps to Rogel. He's
honestly, he's considered, until the heresy, he's considered the favored son of the Emperor, right?
Yes.
Like, his Big E's like, basically like, this is the closest one to me.
Yes, he was made War Master of all the legions, reporting second only to the Emperor.
Yeah, because Emperor basically set out all his legions and said, like, listen to Horus, I got to work on something on Terra, which is the Webway project, and then things happened.
He's sent to the mining world of Chthonia. the thing with Horus is the initial stories about Horus coming to power in Chthonia actually sort of contradict each other, and there's a lot of records that don't necessarily agree, but a lot of it is probably because records about him were removed, because of his notorious nature. But yeah, the Emperor finds him at some point and grants him the 16th Legion early in the Crusade.
Yeah.
Because of how early he was found in the Crusade, and because of how competent he is, he's given a lot of authority very quickly.
Yeah.
He thrived in the mining environment of Chthonia. He was, like most of the Primarchs, in techno-barbarian kill gangs and rose to prominence. Grew up in a decaying hive city, much like Conrad Kurz. He learned their language very quickly, and like most of the Primarchs, began to took over the planet and ruled it. What ends up happening is you may remember I described the rise of the warrior lodges. And a lot of the drive for Horus to maintain the identity of his chapter and its popularity spreading to other chapters, what ends up happening is there's like ritualistic dueling amongst the Marines that's eventually frowned upon. That he's like, oh hey, like Angron's okay with it.
How about we stop killing each other?
Yeah. and what ends up happening is the initial grudges that the Primarchs have with their hands being swatted persists in the warrior lodges. And what ends up happening is Horus is given a vision, a facetious one, a vision while he's being he's grievously wounded, I believe, by an alien weapon, and he's taken to one of these warrior lodges to recuperate. And in this moment, Chaos takes its risk and sends him visions while he's under about what will happen to the Astartes if he does not act. And it's sort of the ultimate road to hell is paved with good intentions. In
they make him believe that Big E is a false emperor and that the only one that can save mankind is Horus. I believe is sort of like the thing that happens.
Yeah, the scab they pick is the one of pride.
Yeah.
In fact, Horus
and eventually he eventually gets killed in a duel with the Emperor, not before grievously wounding him. But because he was killed by the Emperor's sword, I can't remember its name. But basically, when you get killed by the Emperor's sword, you get completely destroyed, mind, body, and soul. Like it eats you.
Yeah. So Sanguinius's psychic projection still exists somewhere in the warp. The demon Primarchs still exist. They still maintain fragments of their personality. Horus no longer exists. His psychic projection, the fact that he's a product of a perpetual, the Emperor is a perpetual and lives ad infinitum, so his children have some aspect of that. But Horus was so thoroughly excised from life, from the warp, from everything, that his presence is gone.
Yep.
And this is the only case out of all the Primarchs where this happened. The ultimate betrayal, results in the ultimate punishment. He was considered such a prize for Chaos that he ends up being a champion of Chaos Undivided. He doesn't really represent any individual Chaos entity. He's really just enraged and vengeful more than anything.
Yeah. So I would argue there's not a whole lot about the Luna Wolves themselves. It's more about like what the Black Legion becomes, which is kind of like an amalgamation of these other traitor legions. So like, yes, there's the Luna Wolves that existed in the Horus Heresy, but nowadays it's all about the Black Legion. I don't know that most people ever really run like a Luna Wolves or a Sons of Horus like army, so to speak. Right?
They're very popular with 30k.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And they're featured prominently with the upcoming reboot of the Epic 30k scale.
Okay. Sorry, speaking out of my butt there, so I don't know.
No. Well, I mean, it's also a very specific moment in time.
Yeah.
So you don't see Luna Wolves in the 41st millennium, for example.
Yeah. I guess that's the Horus here. The Sons of Horus are kind of a downer. So we're gonna move on to the 17th with Lorgar and the Word Bearers.
The Word Bearers. Lorgar is one of the most notorious of. Yes. Yes, Lorgar is one of the most notorious of the traitors in that his only sin was loving the Emperor too much. Mm-hmm. He specifically venerated him as deity, and the Imperial cult today does that. But at the time, the Emperor was specifically and categorically not religious.
Yeah,
and
so
yeah,
on the planet of Colchis, Lorgar became like this sort of like savior figure for there's a basically planet-wide cult to some to the basically the Emperor, but like Lorgar becomes like uplifted as this sort of like high priest of this entire planet or religion, and he finds difficulty in deprogramming himself to the point where like the Emperor shows up, he's like, God just showed up, and basically starts worshiping him, and Biggie's like, stop. And he's like, no, but you're God. He's like, I'm not. Stop worshiping me. And then Lorgar goes, but like you do all these cool things, and you're immortal, and you can like break a planet in half with your sword. He's like, yeah, but I'm not God. He's like, sounds like a god to me.
Doesn't really stop either.
Yeah. No matter how many times, like, everybody's like, Lorgar, maybe you should stop, like, worshipping Big E. He's got a daddy complex, really. Mm-hmm. And eventually, Lorgar's like, well, I'm going to go and spread the religion of the Emperor, basically, even though Big E's like, stop. And then eventually, Big E's like, you can't do that. And then he kills Lorgar's planet.
Yeah, and it's almost a case of a scorned lover. Mm-hmm. Like the hatred he has for the Emperor is only as powerful, as potent as what his love was for him, because the Emperor essentially had to slap his hand away. Mm-hmm. And so
he's like, well, there's got to be a god out there still, so I'm going to look for one. And then he goes into the Eye of Terra.
Yeah, he goes. He
finds
goes
his own
right
god.
in. He goes. He goes like in. I wouldn't call it mania, but just in complete desperation, he goes directly into the eye.
Yeah. And
Chaos is ready, willing, and able to take advantage of his daddy issues. Mm-hmm. Lorgar is up there with one of the most lamentable of the fallen Primarchs.
Yeah. Basically, Lorgar goes, all right, if Big E won't have me, who else will? And he finds some other gods to worship, and then he becomes like the most fanatic. His word bearers become the most fanatical of the traitor Primarchs. Makes sense, their planet got killed on the Emperor's orders by the Ultramarines, so he like basically hangs out in the demon world of Sicarus in like self-imposed isolation, trying to commune with the ruinous powers, and just kind of hangs out. We don't know what he's doing. He's probably going to show up super like mutated and shit when he comes out, like with all four Primarchs all four Chaos Gods going on or something. But
it's usually one or the other. They're usually completely unrecognizable, or because they're undivided, they maintain some level of humanity. Like Abaddon is champion of Chaos Undivided.
Yeah, he's just all like Shadow Man.
Yeah. So
Lorgar is kind of a weird one. Didn't realize there were so many traitor Primarchs in the second half.
Yeah, right.
So Lorgar, word bearers, basically fanatic, like religious cult guys. They like to tattoo like prayers on their faces, on every portion of their skin. They like commune with demons a whole lot. They're kind of weird. And then moving on, we got number 18, the Salamanders. arguably the nicest Space Marine Legion.
Yes, led by Vulcan, and Vulcan very prominently is a perpetual. So he has inhuman cellular regeneration and is arguably immortal.
Yeah.
Even at levels of the Primarchs. He's missing after the heresy. I think he sent his chapter out in a quest to find 9 items. He's just like Vulcan in the Roman interpretation of the Greek religion. He's a smith. He has a giant hammer.
Yeah.
All of his children are very fire oriented. A lot of meltas, a lot of flamers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, they like fire. They're on a volcano. They come from a volcano planet. They're all like super black skinned and have red eyes and stuff. And they like their whole like thing is like in order for them to become like a new salamander space marine, they have to go kill a salamander, which is like not like a little salamander. It's like a dragon, like a volcano dragon thing. And then, but like the cool thing about Vulcan is he's fought a bunch of orcs, and he fought like the biggest, bestest orc there is called the Beast, and then basically hugged him with a nuclear bomb.
Yes, it helps that he knows he's a perpetual. So.
Yeah. So we don't know what happened to Vulcan, but he just hasn't like put himself back together yet. We assume he'll be back.
In the his chapter was almost wiped out during the Istvan drop site massacre. So he was one of the first chapters. His were one of the first chapters that were essentially written off during the opening salvos of the heresy. You may remember the Salamanders from the Badab War, which real life chronologically was their first mention. They since got upgraded into being one of the first founding chapters and became a lot more prominent in the story. Fan favorites. A lot of people like Salamanders. We have friends.
They're just nice.
Salamanders. They're humanitarians.
Nice.
They care very much about humans. Again, some chapters, like Black Templars, will do what it takes to kill the Xenos, no matter what. And other chapters,
they're more likely assume that you're like in league or like doing heretic things than not. They won't care about collateral damage. Salamanders, even though they use fire, tend to like try to limit the collateral damage. They're nice guys. They'll try to save the child stuck in a burning building rather than just be like, well, it's just a mortal. I don't care. So they're kind of an interesting one because a lot of times the Space Marines, because of their like long life and like basically being like harder, better, faster, stronger than every other human and like losing their humanity, so to speak, Salamanders are one of the ones that sort of retained that more than any other one. So I don't. Do you have anything else about Sally's?
No. I was going to move on to 19.
Yes, the Raven God, led by Corvus Corax.
Hey, Ben.
The emo chapter.
What do you think Corvus means in Latin?
Snake. No, it's Burb. It's a crow. He's a crow. He's crow guy.
Yeah. It's Corvus is literally Raven of the Raven Guard. His name is like Raven Lord, Raven.
Yeah, he's like Raven. He's Raven leading the Raven Guard. It's funny. It's bad.
He looks just like Sting from wrestling. He looks like the Crow, the comic book.
Yeah. Black stringy hair, like, oh, everything sucks. I'm dark and foreboding, and he likes to fly around. And
all of his
big
guys
claws.
All of his guys are winged. They're very much about jump infantry and
he does not like Lorgar.
No, he does not like Lorgar. He's basically, a lot of people sort of reduced the Primarchs into being like Perturabo is bad version of Ferrus Manus, and Corvus Corax is good version of Night Lord's traitor Primarch Conrad Kurz.
Right.
And that's a bit of it's a bit reductive, but surface level it isn't really.
It checks out.
The Raven Guard were another chapter that was nearly exterminated in the Isfahan Dropsite massacre. So that's why you don't necessarily see a lot of mentions of them until the past 8 years, when all the Horus Heresy books were sort of, there was a
finished out, or are coming out.
yeah. So you start seeing more about the chapters. Corvus is almost more well known and anticipated for the 41st millennium, because everyone's waiting for him to come back, because he's one of the few that are currently active. He is like Lehman Russ, where he's currently in the warp. Yeah, he's in the warp, smiting evil. However, it is highly suggested that he has been changed from being in the warp and is living shadow. Yeah, and is perhaps like Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, and is big.
He's Crow guy.
Yeah, Crow guy.
We're assuming he's gonna come out and he's gonna have a big old crow head and be like made of shadows, and it's gonna be cool. But hopefully GW sticks with that, and
we'll see.
Yeah,
we will see.
There's been accounts from like Lorgar of like basically barely escaping Corvus and Lehman Russ in the warp, and he's been being pursued by a massive wolf and a living shadow. Because they really don't like Lorgar.
But he had lightning claws, and I believe he had like this electric whip thing, and he was known for subversive tactics, and his men were masters of stealth and that sort of thing. So if that's a playstyle that interests you, if you like jump attack infantry and land speeders and that sort of thing, the Raven Guard might be for you.
And if you like coloring things black.
Yes, very. Other than the Iron Hands, probably the easiest Marines to paint.
Yeah. Not a lot else to say about them other than the cool part of we're hoping we get like a Raven Primarch. It'd be really cool. That leaves us with the final Legion of the Alpha Legion, led by Alfarius and Omegon.
Yeah, there's so many memes about Alpha Legion because we don't know if they're loyalists, we don't know if they're traitor, we don't know if Alfarius is still alive.
Maybe
or if
both.
Omegon. Yeah, because purportedly Rogol slayed one at the Battle of Pluto. But someone's like, maybe Rabute killed the other one, or maybe that was the original. The whole thing about Alpha Legion is you don't know.
Basically, like, because Alfarius and Omegon are twin Primarchs, they're the same size as like a normal Space Marine. So, like, normally, like, you can tell a Primarch from a Space Marine because they're about, like, 2 or 3 feet taller. But, like, Alfarius and Omegon, because they're twins, they're the same size as a regular Space Marine. And, so, like, basically, there's a whole thing where, like, all of the Alpha Legion is sort of like an I Am Spartacus thing. They're like, yep. I am Alfarius. No, I am Alfarius. Oh, no, I am Alfarius. And,
subversion, just complete subversion.
Yeah, they're like basically like this perfect spy chapter. Their symbol is that of a Hydra because, you know, like slay one head, 3 will arise, blah, 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 that sort of thing. And there's not a whole lot that's been done with them, I feel like. It's never really been like said whether they're like guilty or they're traitor or loyalist, or maybe they're both. We can't tell. Until we get to the end game, we will probably never know.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who play Chaos, and they like the Night Lords, and they like there are a ton of Iron Warriors fans, and anyone can go to a store and buy corny World Eaters. I don't know a lot of people who play Alpha Legion. I think there are more questions than answers with the chapter. Yeah. I think that's intentional. Yeah. I do know at the Siege of Terra, purportedly there were Alpha Legion troops that were in stasis in Terra that were not activated. So we don't know if that means they stayed their hand because they were loyalists, or they decided not to throw in with the siege. So we don't know if they were just being bad at being traitors, or if they were actually loyal, and all these question marks are in the air. One of the more enigmatic, probably the most enigmatic of the chapters.
Yeah, there's just like a whole lot that's not really we don't know enough about them to say anything. I don't think there's even any like there's no books from their perspective even, are there?
There's one very prominent one. I can't remember the name of it. It's like, is it Sons of the Hydra? I don't. There are a lot of novels out regarding the heresy in the past 10 years, and every chapter more or less gets their due. I straight up need to read more about Alpha Legion. I'll be the first to admit it.
Yeah. I'm just assuming that we just like there has like maybe like that there hasn't been a book from their perspective, because like I'm looking at there's a bunch of successor chapters, I guess. Huh. There's a lot more in this wiki page than I expected, and I'm not going to read through it right now.
I would recommend Legion, Secrets and Lies by Dan Abnett. That's like the dedicated novel for Alpha Legion.
Yeah.
I mean, considering the subtitle is Secrets and Lies.
Yeah. The Spy Guys. Spy versus Spy. So that brings us to the end of the 20 Legions of the Emperor. Brendan, we've covered the Adeptus Astartes. What do you want to do next?
Long ago, one of our first episodes about the game was about the orcs.
Do you want to do a Xenos episode?
We could do a Xenos episode. We could cover the Nids because they're prominently in the new box set release. We could do Eldar.
How long can you really talk about the Nids?
That's the thing. I would
It's like there's a lot I could dedicate an episode to the orcs. I don't know if I could do a whole episode on the Nids.
Yeah, they're more of a plot contrivance.
All right.
Like we could definitely do Eldar. We could do Tau. There's, I would say Eldar have material since the 80s. So
I mean, we can break out the Eldars into their factions, but I'd say let's do a Xenos episode.
We can do it.
I guess we'll suffer the Xenos just to
hey, know your enemy.
We can just talk about it. We got to know our enemies, guys.
Know your enemy out there,
especially those dirty Eldar. So with that, thanks everybody for watching. We'll be talking next time on our little nerds on 40k. We'll talk about the Xenos and all the little shit they do. Thanks everybody. Again, next week we'll be talking about the book The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, and we'll catch you again on Thursday. We'll be continuing our Dungeons and Dragons spectacular. Bye-bye.